presentation on PBWiki.
Sure. Okay. So my name is David Weekly. I've been a programmer since I was very young. I've been programming with Linux since the Slackware days, pre-Red Hat. All of our company servers are run off of Linux. The presentation I'm doing today is run off of a Windows laptop, and apologies. But we make really extensive use of Linux. So I wanted to talk with you guys today, although this is clearly a pretty intimate setting, so you can interrupt me at any point. Let's have some dialogue. But how it's really interesting that in modern times, you can just go and start tinkering, and pretty quickly, that tinkering can turn into a service that's been used by millions of people. And what does that look like? You know, I can give a number of anecdotes about what it looked like at PBWiki, how literally a weekend hack job ended up turning into a pretty substantial company. And a number of my peers also found the same thing, that projects they were working on ended up ballooning, surprisingly, into much larger entities. Whereas people who come to the table with a much more complex set of ideas, a much more complex universe, and say, like, hey, I want to go and build out this big thing, they tend to fail. Whereas the small hobbies, where you start with something really, really simple, something core that can be built up upon, those tend to succeed. So, the big lesson here was really that you shouldn't try and come up with this big, complex universe of ideas. You should just try and find something that's useful, something that will help other people, something that makes a difference, the simplest thing that could possibly work. And then you want to put it in front of people and iterate based on their feedback. It's pretty simple. There's not a lot to it. So step one, a lot of open source folks go with the mantra, scratch your own itch. If you're having a problem with something, you're going to want to go ahead and fix it. That's best when you're leveraging existing tools, existing open source, existing platforms and services that are available to you, and just getting the job done. Now, this may mean that the work that you produce is not particularly elegant. It may only be a couple lines of code. It may be a couple pipes, a Perl script that's a page or two long. But that doesn't mean that it's not useful. It doesn't mean that it's not providing a tremendous amount of value. And I think that a lot of tinkerers, a lot of hackers tend to underestimate the value that they can bring by even something, a program that's very short, something that's very small, that can end up saving lots and lots of people's time. So the thing to do is to take account of all those different times in your day when you're finding friction. You're finding that you're set back by things. You're finding that you're having to wait or do repetitive tasks. And you want to be lazy and think about, well, gosh, how can I automate these things? How can I make my day better, make my day more productive? You want to sketch out some ideas of how you can go and do that. And the answer is, again, maybe very, very simple. It may be procedural, it may be a handful of lines of code. It doesn't matter. But just go ahead and do that. Be lazy and put out the solution and make your own day better. Put it in front of some other people and see what they think. A lot of folks try and invent a new language because they're having difficulties with their language, or invent a new operating system. Those things are a little bit too large. I would say focusing on the smaller projects, something that's just really quick, you can drop in and increase your productivity, is going to make for a much better kind of hack. And something that I found really useful is I actually carry pen and paper around with me when I'm going to meetings, and just coming up with ideas right there, writing down what I want to do, literally writing down what I want to do before I start hacking. And that really helps me stay focused and not get distracted in making fun magic technology, but instead just making the thing that I set out to do. So yeah, as they say, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So keeping that single step small and well-defined is very, very helpful for making useful hacks that you bring up to lots of people. Something else to keep in mind is just raw minimalism. Keeping the interface to what you're doing as simple as possible, as minimalistic as possible. When I first launched PBWiki, the website was actually done almost to be a joke in how reductionist can you get it to be. How little text, how few form fields what I need to go and put on the page to have it actually be useful, actually have it be functional. And I started off with like 5 form fields, and then 4, then 3. Then it turned out that I only needed to ask what the person's wiki name is going to be and their email address, and bam, I could set them on the wiki. And that sort of minimalist approach, while done more as a thought exercise than anything, turned out to be really, really valuable because it made the service simple, because a lot of excess had been trimmed away. A lot of default decisions had been made for the user. And that sort of simplicity by default lends itself well to a more usable application. Makes it a much more usable experience. So I think there's also a bit of a predilection sometimes among programmers to explain something away with text. This concept right here is complicated, so I'm going to put a bunch of text around it and explain what the user should do here. But the thing is that users are lazy as well. The users don't want to go and read the text and figure out what you meant and get in your head about it. So you need to make the interface do the right thing by default and guide them to the right kind of choices just instinctually, just sort of gazing over the page. So as soon as you have something that could possibly be useful for anybody, you should probably put it out there. A lot of people want to make it for their sort of professional ego. They want to polish it up, have it just so, have it perfect, and everything before they put it in front of other people. That's not actually all that good of an idea, because the biggest problem that you have is not that your product is not polished, it's that you're building the wrong thing. So to safeguard against that, you want to go and iterate it and co-develop it with the market. And the way that you do that is to put it out as soon as possible, get feedback on what you should be building, and then continue to work with your users on building the product that you need to build. So a lot of folks want to wait until they've got a big, splashy entrance on the market. I worked for a company called Dare.com for a year and a half, and they were in stealth beta actually for 5.5 years. I had to pass 5 rounds of interviews with the company before they would even tell me what the company did. They were waiting to make their big splash, and they're really concerned that if the product wasn't absolutely perfect on day 1, that nobody would ever come back. That people would take a look at it, people would say, this is crap, they'd go away, they'd never come back, and they'd never have another chance to enter the market. So this sort of paranoia meant that even though they had something that was fun and unpolished, about half a year or a year into their development, they ended up waiting about 6 years into their development before they actually launched the product. And at that point, they built completely the wrong thing for the market. So PBWiki, by contrast, was actually open and running from hour 1, literally. I had people signed up and using it about 3 hours after I registered the domain name. So this sort of dramatic difference in approaches really makes a big difference when you're co-developing the product, even from the ground floor, with your customers, as opposed to trying to hoist something perfect on the world. And we've seen this in the history of Linux, like Linux 0.01, very, very simple kernel that was sent out to the mailing list. Likewise, Perl started off very, very simple, just kind of a bit of a patch between an awk and sed, and a few more things glued on. PHP started off very, very simple. A lot of these projects that are now very big open source projects are incredibly complex. They've gotten that way growing with the market, being built up with their users. Now when I say market, I don't necessarily just mean people who are paying lots of money for software. I mean the people who are using the software, people who are using the services. So this applies to open source just as well as it applies to commercial products. So another thing that has been really useful for PBWiki was to, as quickly as possible, be eating our own dog food. So to be actually doing development on our own service, on our own platform. Likewise, a lot of the early Linux hackers, as quickly as possible, got to doing their ongoing development on Linux. And that helped especially sensitize the bugs that existed in the operating system to the people who are improving it. So you really want to become your own best fan, but also your own critic. And that means using your own tool day in, day out. And when something frustrates you, just go ahead and fix it. Like, so feel the user's pain when people are having issues with your product, or they're having issues with your piece of software. The best way to do that is to actually be a user and use your own product day in, day out. So that's eating your own dog food. A lot of folks worry about optimizing things, getting it super fast, even the first run through. They want to wait to release it until it's polished and they've guaranteed it's the fastest possible algorithm. They throw in all sorts of fancy caching, and then they have cache invalidation issues. And these are very, very common issues. And the answer there is that you shouldn't really focus on optimizing or scaling or making it fancy in any way until those are issues. Treat those as future bottlenecks. And at the point that you have issues with different parts of your code, scaling and so forth, then you should go and address them. But it's a bigger problem that people are not using your service than that you have a well-optimized but unused piece of software. So before I wrote PBWiki, I spent about 1.5 years writing an instant messaging enhancement service called I Am Smarter. And I optimized the heck out of it before I launched it. And then I had maybe 100, 200 users, but I put a lot of work designing the system so it could handle millions of simultaneous people going and connecting to their instant messaging. But the work that I did there was, first off, useless because I didn't have millions of people using my service. And secondly, it actually made the system more delicate and more difficult to develop on. And so I found that I was not able to iterate as quickly as I needed to bring my users the product that they wanted, because I put in this very complex, very powerful scalability architecture. So I had done the timing wrong. I built in the scalability before building something that actually needed to scale because it had a lot of users. So goal one really should be make something that's being used by a lot of people that has the optimization as a bottleneck, speed and scalability as bottleneck, and then at that point address those bottlenecks. So another really important thing for PBWiki and for a number of these open source communities has been, from day one, building a community around the product. And so this goes back to what I was saying about building the community with the market, building the product with the market, that you're co-developing it, that you're co-developing your software along with the people who are using your software. In order to do that, you need to be connected to the people who are actually using your software. So there's a lot of ways to do that these days. There's a lot of ways to go and build community. One way to start is to go and let people know who are bloggers in a given community, and to let them know about your software. If it's a piece of open source software, you can go and post it on FreshMeet and start getting comments there, freshmeet.net. You can find, as people find out about your service and start blogging about your service, you can find their blog posts on Technorati and Google. And we found that very effective at PBWiki of reaching out to users who were really positively or negatively surprised by different aspects of the service. And they were just amazed that the people who were working at the company, the people who had founded the company, were going to their blog, were commenting on their blog, and were working with them on their issues. And the fact of the matter is that the technology to do this is pretty straightforward these days. It's not a hard thing to do, to find people blogging about your product. You will find people who are blogging about your service and comment, but it really impresses them. It turns them into evangelists. It makes it sure that they're giving you lots and lots of feedback about what they like and what they don't like, because you've established these personal relationships with your users out there. Another important bit is to see what you can do to centralize their feedback, to connect them with each other, because users who are wrestling with maybe some difficult to use, difficult to understand part of your product, part of your service, they want to connect with each other and help each other out, and that's just a win-win-win all around. Because if you can save somebody who would have otherwise gotten frustrated and left, but then can be helped out by another person who's using your software, then that's going to be tremendously useful to keeping them in the community, keeping them engaged, and then turning them into evangelists in turn to bring more people to your product, bring more people to your service. So there's a number of services that are available to help centralize user communities. One that we use at PBWiki is called getsatisfaction.com. We also, early on, ran our own forum using PHPDB. There's hosted forums that are readily available, like at lafora.com. There's a bunch of these that are out there. So there's a plethora of these options, of very low cost, even free, hosted services that can help you centralize the community. Another important aspect of community management is keeping people up to date with what's going on. It's not good enough anymore to just have a changelog that's in your tar.gz. People want to know as things are being developed. And so having a blog where the longer issues can be gone and worked out, having a Twitter account where it can go and post updates, as the software is getting developed, as issues are realized, opening up your bug tracking system. These are all like really modern but very easy to do things to keep you better connected with the community and to get more feedback from people about what they like, what they don't like, what issues are really bugging them, and what they love most. And then finally, you can keep the documentation for your product, especially the APIs and so forth, fresh using the wiki. Of course, PBWiki, I'm going to say, is a really nice solution for that. There are a number of other hosted wikis that you can use. So then, step 3, once you've built an initial early adopter community of people who are engaging your product, you're finding the people who are finding your product, having a conversation with them, you've got centralized conversations, you put something out very, very early. Now, you can focus on spreading this. And really, there's a very glib answer here, which is really good for technologists, which is that these days, your product really is your best marketing. It's not going to be a good idea to go out and blow a whole bunch of money on billboard advertising on 101, or radio ads, or TV ads, Super Bowl ads, and so forth. These things are very expensive, they don't show very good ROI, and they don't make a lot of sense. What we're finding is that the best way to actually make a product that spreads is to make a great product, which is great news for consumers. So, as examples, Google, for instance, didn't pay for advertising anywhere for years after they launched. And how did they spread? Well, it was all via word of mouth, because they had a great product. And that's where they focused their time and attention. Likewise, PBWiki has gotten almost all of its growth from word of mouth. When people find us even on Google, the vast majority of people who find PBWiki by searching for, literally, PBWiki. So people are literally telling each other on the phone, in person, etc., to come visit our site. And that's strictly as a result of people being really happy with our product. If you have a more consumer-style app versus an enterprise-style app, one really important thing to look at is user use. And what this is modeling a loop of user invitations. So as people come into your site, a certain proportion of them are going to really engage. They're going to sign up. They're going to create whatever your engagement method is. If it's a downloadable piece of open source, it's like, do they actually go and download it? Do they install it? Right? And then of those people, what percentage of those actually invite other people, and how many other people do they invite? And so that multiplication factor is really important for them, how many people they're bringing into your front door, and then in turn taking a look at how many of those people that have been invited, how many of the invitees go and actually engage themselves, actually go and download a piece of software and become part of your community.
How did you learn that most of the people who get the PBWiki get to do it by searching for it?
So there's a number of analytics packages that are pretty easy to go and drop in. Like Google Analytics is one example. And they take a look at the HTTP referred of folks who are coming in. If the referred is coming from www.google.com/ $Q equals PBWiki, versus $Q equals collaboration, then you know what search term they use to go and find your site. And so the tools actually go and slice and dice those, even across multiple search engines, and can tell you across Google and Ask.com and Yahoo and all of these are the top terms that were used to find you, for instance. So yeah, it's one really handy thing about where we're at right now with Web 2.0 is that there are a lot of these great tools that people have put a lot of work into that are very easy to go and drop into your site for tracking things like this, for tracking day in, day out, how popular is the site getting, where are these people coming from, how do they flow through the site. These things used to be very hard. You needed to go and have an Oracle DBA, you needed to go and buy a whole bunch of very expensive, fancy hardware and software in order to get reasonable answers on analytics for how people are finding you and how they're flowing through the site. But these things are moving down the chain. They're becoming a lot more accessible to people, which is exciting. So if you have got a consumer-style application, something that's sort of mass market that's appealing to regular folks, then you're going to want to be looking at each of these different phases here. So for each visitor that comes in, how many are signing up? How do you tweak that? If you change how big the button is, if you change the layout of the page, you do a bunch of these different tests to go and see what percentage are going ahead and signing up. You may find that certain word combinations, certain color combinations may actually be dramatically more effective than others in getting people to actually engage the service. Likewise, for transitioning people who have signed up for your product, who have downloaded the tarball, etc., there's a number of different things you can do to encourage them to invite other people into the project and to invite a large number of people. And one of the most common of these is to ask for an address book, to say, hey, can you upload to me your Gmail or Outlook or Yahoo Mail address book, or a CSV if you've got that. And then you can invite all of those different people. You can pick which ones to invite.
Can you share any stories from PBWiki about things that you did that had that kind of impact, like changing the color scheme or the wording or whatever, like you were saying? Were there any specific things that you can think of that you could share that might
There were a couple of things.
Like,
saying free was really important. If you don't say it, people assume that the next thing they click is going to ask for a credit card and will go away. So if something really is free, even if it's open source free, it needs to say free pretty prominently. Another thing is that the next action for the user to perform needs to be really clear. The next thing that you want the user to do should probably be a different color than other things. If you have got a green button that's next, then that should be just about the only green thing on the page. Likewise, if you have a red button that says sign up, that should be nearly the only red thing on the page. And that sort of ends up guiding the user naturally towards the desired outcome, towards what you want them to do. Is that helpful? So, like I said before, engaging the community, going and building that up, talking with people about what they like and what they don't like, is really important to spreading this. One thing we did at PBWiki was that we found that a number of educators were telling each other about PBWiki and actually doing so at conferences. We were most surprised when we got an email in that said, hey, we really loved your presentation in Chicago. Thanks so much for coming. I've been an avid PBWiki user since then. And we said, oh, that's fine. We never were in Chicago. And it turned out that a really fanatical PBWiki user had presented a whole conference-length track on using PBWiki and why everybody in the audience should use PBWiki at this educational conference in Chicago. We said, that's fantastic. We should see what we can do to encourage this, because we don't have the budget to go and fly around the country and give talks at educational conferences. So we started a program called PBWiki Presenter Pack, where if you said you were presenting at an educational conference, we would go and ship you a bunch of materials. We'd give you some t-shirts, we'd give you some free wikis to give away, we give you presentation materials that could help you go put together a PBWiki presentation for this educational conference. And we were expecting that maybe 15, 20 teachers would take us up on it. Well, we had to switch t-shirt vendors because we had to sign up more than 1,000 teachers who were giving presentations within the first 2 months. So, I mean, we actually, most of our marketing budget today actually is in t-shirts, sending them out to people who are presenting PBWiki around the world. And the result is, in the education sphere, a tremendous outpouring of new users, of sign-ups of new classrooms that are coming online with PBWiki. We've got about 200,000 classrooms now that are using PBWiki. Almost as a direct result of this program, of encouraging this kind of viral spread, of finding out how users are talking to each other about your service, about your product, and then using that language to go and communicate, and encouraging them to go and communicate more. So these sort of user loops are really important for understanding how do other people think about your software, because it might actually be different than the way that you think about your software. When I started PBWiki, I had no idea it was going to be used for online classrooms. I didn't build it for that purpose. But we've ended up having to do a number of specific changes to the product to make it easier to use for educators, and likewise to have these marketing programs to help educators tell each other about the product. I would never have anticipated that from the beginning. And then finally, as you're spreading, pick some of the core metrics. I gave you some example metrics here for if you're in a consumer-focused application for doing user loops and virality. Pick a couple of core metrics for how many people are engaging your product. How vigorously are they engaging your product? Does their usage drop off over time? And that would seem to indicate that maybe this looks like it fits my need, but oh wait, after using a bit, I found out that it didn't fit my need. So actually track these things and optimize for them. Try lots of experiments. Most of your experiments will be wrong. Some of them may even move the needle in the wrong direction. That's okay. Just stay honest and keep experimenting. You'll find some things that do move the needle in the way that you want. So, like I said, worrying about optimization after you've got a booming community and after the main thing to work on, the bottleneck for success here, is that things aren't fast enough. So worry about optimization last. The good news is that there's a lot of great tools that are out there. There's a lot of great architecture that's out there for converting a web application or a number of other internet-style applications to something that's a lot more scalable. There's a lot more theory that's out there for how to build a scalable application, and there's a lot more cloud tools that are out there. So for instance, there's Google App Engine, a very recent entrance into this, Amazon's EC2, and there's a number of startups actually that are going to be coming out with their own cloud hosting infrastructures within the next year. So things that were pretty challenging to go and scale up, like quickly bringing up 1,000 more servers to go and chew on analytics for your company, whereas that would have been very involved even 2 years ago. Nowadays, that's becoming a pretty easy and straightforward task. They can go and bring up a couple thousand instances, have them go and run a task that's partitioned between them, and then have them go to sleep and go away. These things were only available to the most extremely integrated vendors out there, folks like IBM, folks like Sun and Google. But now they're becoming available to all of us for pennies on the dollar. It's pretty impressive how much power is out there. And in terms of scaling your team, just an interesting little anecdote here. Our fourth hire was actually our office admin. And people ask us, like, oh, isn't that a little soon? Like, you don't need a secretary with a team of 3. It was absolutely true that we needed a secretary. But what she took care of was all of those little extra tasks that were distracting us from building the product and building the company. So don't be afraid to leverage extra help. And this even means there are virtual admins that you can hire for like 10, 20 bucks an hour. We found great people off of Craigslist for like 15 bucks an hour. You go through some resumes pretty quickly and find people to help you leverage your time, help keep you focused on what you do best, on building product, on paying attention to the community, and on developing your service as a whole. So don't be afraid to leverage outside help. I know that was a big stickler for me. The first 2 years after I started my company, I was the only employee, and I didn't have anyone part-time. I wanted to do it all myself. And in retrospect, that was pretty dumb. There are great people out there who are very cost-effective to come and help you out and take care of the work that you are not best optimized for. You should stay focused on where you can bring the most value. So, yeah, that's actually, that's it. If you go and tinker, build lots of little things that are useful, that help a real problem, and you listen to the people who are using them, one of them is likely to go and get very big, get very popular. And it's a lot of fun making things that are actually useful and focusing on usability and utility. So, that's it.
So questions now?
Yeah.
Your background, as I understand, is almost entirely on the technical side, right?
That's right.
So where did you develop the business skills to manage this company?
Gradually. Just like I pitch in this talk, this sort of thing is best done incrementally. I worked for a big company, Legato, which we did enterprise software before they got bought by EMC, and I was employed as a coder there, but I made a point of going around to the different managers and asking them their theories of management, like what worked, what didn't work. I didn't have any management experience myself at that point. And then I worked for their.com, and likewise, I went around to the different managers there, and I tried to see like what made sense, who was a good manager, who was a bad manager, what made the good managers good, what made the bad managers bad. And then starting PBWiki made a whole lot of mistakes, but also having advisors and having peers that I could reach out to talk about theories of management, like how to be a good boss, how to hire good people, how to retain good people. Those were all things that I learned gradually. And I think that if right out of college I had been given a 20-person company to go run, I would have totally screwed it up. I would have no idea what to do. I think it was really important in the process to have a lot of humility about it, to say, I'm a really good coder. I understand a lot about technology, but I understand very little about business, and I understand very little about management. And that enabled kind of a Zen mind, beginner mind, to pay attention to my peers, to pay attention to my employees, and keep them happy.
What was that phrase you used? Somebody mind?
Zen mind, beginner mind.
What is that?
So the phrase is like it's a Zen koan that basically the beginner's mind, to be in that phase where you're learning something totally new and you have no assumptions going in, you've got no firm beliefs, you're just kind of open to everything, but that's the ideal sort of state for learning. Yeah. So I think in that sense, having humility coming into this thing, like, I'm a terrible businessman, I'm a terrible manager. I have no idea how to grow a company. I'm responsible for its finances. Like, help! And people respond really well to that. You know, versus like, I know exactly how to go and run a company as well. Then I'm not going to help you. You don't need any help.
Well, I got a question about costs and and value added. And I haven't been back to PBWiki since I sent my wife to it about 6 months ago.
Okay.
And she actually. She's not sophisticated enough, she still uses Gmail. That's her basic platform.
Yeah.
But on the PBWiki site, what I was going to ask you about is what have you got as a rule of thumb for how many dollars or cents does it cost to support a user? And then how does that compare with the value added that's people, when the people subscribe? And because it's beyond the electricity for a couple servers, now you've got a little tiny payroll, and you've got some insurance, and some charges for data recovery services. So, do you have a cost figure that for the fixed operations, and then how many people you can support out there for so many dollars?
So the short of it is that the operational costs in terms of the purchasing the servers, buying the bandwidth, the electricity, the cooling, the real estate, you know, all the hard drives, the CPU, the memory, all of that is incredibly cheap. It's less than 5% of our bookings actually goes to fixed operations. And that's a percentage that's actually been continuing to decline. And I'm expecting that by the end of next year, it's going to be closer to 2 or 3% of the money that we bring in goes towards fixed operations.
Like your hosting and all that stuff?
Yeah, our hosting and buying servers and all that. We do our own co-location. We buy our own servers and then locate them up in San Francisco. So those costs have gotten to be very, very cheap. And even if you're in the cloud, if you're using something like EC2, you really have to be doing something really intensive, like online editing an HD video or something to start to move the needle on the costs there. I mean, most of what a wiki is really shuffling around text. And text is very small, it's very computationally light, it doesn't take a lot of bandwidth, it doesn't take a lot of disk space, you know, it doesn't take a lot of memory, right? So we can get really far on a modern architecture with a primarily text engagement platform. So then what you have to consider is like, okay, well, what about the human support costs, right? And it's really important for us to keep those down. So that's part of the advantage of having a peer support forum like Get Satisfaction, so that you not only get the community aspects of, you know, gosh, this is cool, there's this community I can participate around this product, it must be a vibrant product, let me go join it, but also it reduces your support costs as some of your expert users end up effectively becoming support for your company.
So would you say that of your cost structure, about 20, the labor cost, money paid to people showing up, is about 20 times greater than the hardware side of things, pushing the bandwidth out over the internet?
Well, overall, almost all of what PBWiki pays money for is people.
Yeah.
Now, most of that is research and development. is programmers, is marketers who are actually not just kind of devising banner ads, but who are helping co-design the product and connect us with our community. Very little of that is actually like support personnel. So it's probably about 10%, 15% of our company's budget is on support personnel.
And from your standpoint, can you, on a piece of paper, can you figure out the economics of Google? Because I've heard they're buying warehouses up near electric generating units.
Yes.
Northern in Oregon, because they need so much electricity. And I'm wondering, have they pushed the hardware costs up even higher than 120 to 1? Are they spending more money on hardware than a small organization? Or are they still throwing huge amounts of people and their hardware costs are proportionally small, like yours are small?
Well, they are hiring a lot of people. They're up to, what, 15,000 people now? Ballpark, yeah, but the number of servers they have is absolutely ridiculous, right? So they've been scaling up servers, I would say, even faster than they've been scaling up people. The availability, reliability, and cost of power are big factors. It was interesting to read about how they've gone and built a number of plants up in Oregon, right by where there used to be aluminum smelting factories, and so it was highly energy. It took a huge amount of energy, which is why all the plumbing was there for running all those big server farms.
Well, the other thought was on the users, the amount of money they spend on their side, like supporting the bandwidth to get to you. Like, for instance, my house, it's $68 a month, simply for my wife to connect to anything. And so the dollars in the economic picture, then there's that overall front end cost of all those users out there. It's way overwhelms your side of it. But for each $20,000 you spend, if you have 1 million users at 175 watts each.
In terms of the overall cost, all the parties involved?
I mean, all the investment people spend to get to your service, that must be a factor of 5 to 20 times greater than the cash you see going on or the energy you see happening on your side relationship.
It's hard to run that math, particularly because most of the other costs involved, including ours, are fixed costs, right? I mean, your wife doesn't have to pay extra to get to our site, to the ISP, right? So all of those costs are fixed costs. So how much extra cost does PBWiki cause in the overall economic picture? It's hard to say. I mean, until we have stats about people who are signing up for internet connections who wouldn't have otherwise in order to get to PBWiki.
I wanted to just ask a slightly different track question, which is, have you changed your pricing structure over the last?
Oh, several times. We've changed our pricing structure several times to go back to how our users want to think about paying for the product. And what it came down to is that the model that's getting pretty popular for software as a service companies is to charge per user per month. So PBWiki's pricing is $8 per user per month. And that was a price that people could get their head around. Yep. Other questions?
Google Apps. Do you have a Kidney doll which you stick the pins in Google Apps? Because it's stealing people away from me.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. They're tough competition because they're not trying to compete. That's sort of like if you're in the railroad business or on the time of Standard Oil, right? They're trying to wipe out Microsoft SharePoint. They really don't care about PBWiki. We're not in their sites. But if we ended up being roadkill in their drive to nuke the bottom lines of Microsoft by wiping out SharePoint, then they really don't care one way or another. So it is interesting. Most of the other folks we compete against, we're competing against squarely. Like there's an Australian company, Atlassian, that makes a product called Confluence. There's a product called ClearSpace, made by a company called Jive. And we compete pretty directly against those folks. But Google's interesting because they're not really even trying to make money off of that service. So.
I think the saving grace of that is nothing about their app isn't particularly programmable, and it can't be packaged in central organization. So,
any other questions from folks?
Most of the installations is hosted everywhere.
100% of them are hosted.
So yeah.
We're hosted only. Yeah. Which means that we don't have to worry about awkward support issues if somebody's misconfigured PBWiki on their own server.
People have no problems sharing of their intelligence.
Oh, they want to see that we've got a strong terms of service that respects their privacy, that respects their intellectual property. Those things are really important. They also want to know that we've got good security. They want to know, how do you protect my data? And we have to give them good answers for that. Once they're assured of that, once they've seen other high-profile clients that also care a lot about security, like banks, like Symantec and so forth, then they're quickly reassured that, okay, these guys aren't just a bunch of hooligans. They're going to safeguard my data. Yeah, I see a general trend towards things going into the cloud.
What's your clip count?
We've got 24 people now. And we had 13 at the beginning of the year.
this is a long ways because of when you talked to this group a year ago,
Yeah.
it was two guys gonna run the place by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, we had pretty much the whole company at the last talk. There were, all I believe it was at the time 5 of us were in the room. Yeah. Other questions?
So what's your answer to like how to retain programmers?
How to retain good programmers? It's a good question. I think giving them an environment where they can work on interesting problems, are engaged, and work on their own hours is really important. Like, so if you mandate that people come in at night and leave at 5, that doesn't work so well. And then just listening to them. If they're having issues, if they're not being productive, like talk with them about what's going on, and make sure that you set things up for success. So instead of trying to hire programmers and then slot them into specific tasks that you have to do, instead co-develop the tasks with them to make sure that they're always working on the stuff that they're best working on. Hiring them though, and finding great programmers in the Bay Area and hiring them, that's tough. I don't have a good answer for that. All right, cool. Well, thank you, everybody.
What technology does it is it open source?
A lot of our core infrastructure software is open source. The software that actually runs PBWiki itself, we wrote.
Database?
We actually we use MySQL and we use a distributed file system called MobileFS. Okay.
Tell us some more about your software.
Well, let's take this offline. Yeah. All right. Cool. Thanks.